A long time ago, not long after the Toba catastrophe that had brought our earliest ancestors to Astoria, an early tribe of nomadic people who still remembered the world they left behind were wandering, and they found somewhere. There was a harsh winter, so they settled near the Dracula mountains. We now know why there are no large predators near those mountains. But in those early days, the tribe was just happy to have found a place in Astoria that didn't have large birds, large reptiles, or other murderous tribes. The Dracula Mountains had plentiful berries, fruits, and nuts growing along the slopes. But it also held simple metals and ores along veins and in the rivers of melting snow. There was even a young child who even collected the strange, soft gray metal they found in the rivers. They enjoyed bending it for hours and even scraping away the tarnish to reveal the shine underneath. One day, while the gatherers of the tribe climbed the slopes, seeking the berries, a young boy who was picking from a wild berry bush found that behind the thorny plant was a small cave in the mountain. Curious, he crawled forward and tried to brace himself by the edges of the small cave mouth. The edges of the cave were very sharp, though, and as the boy peered down into the dark, the blood on his hands caused him to slip and fall into the crevasse. When the boy fell, he screamed, and all the gatherers who were with him came to where he was. But there was nothing they could do to let him out. The hole was too deep for him to climb out, and they could hear the boy's echoing cries, but they couldn't see him. And no matter how much rope was let down into the hole, the boy couldn't reach it. Even after they removed the bush blocking the path, no one else could fit down the hole. It was too small for anyone else to fit down there, even for the children. The boy's mother waited by the small cave mouth, calling down to her son, so that way he wouldn't be alone. But they were all certain he wasn't going to make it. Children's deaths in those days were very high. I wasn't even allowed to name a child until they turned 10, just to make sure that they lived. In the bottom of the cave, the boy continued to bleed from his hands, unable to see anything and unable to find a way out. The only sound was the drip of water, the pounding of his heart, and the distant chirp of the bats. When the bats found him, though, they were attracted to the blood on his own hands. The boy, desperate for anything to eat or drink, so he would rub his injured hands on the walls to make himself keep bleeding, and these would attract the bats of Dracula Mountains to his hands. And when they came to drink the blood from his hands, he would snap their necks and chew on them, eating out their hearts and letting their blood mingle with his own. After 3 days in the dark cave, his mother still waited above, tired and hungry, but not willing to leave her son until she knew that he was dead. She could hear her son's voice call up to her. "I'm hungry, Mother." She dropped berries down to him, but still, he called up that he was hungry. Not sure what else to give him, she only dropped more food down to him, starving herself further, trying to feed her son. That night, though, on the full moon's light, the mother heard scrabbling from the cave. When she looked there, she could see in the moonlight that there was her son. He looked different. His arms and legs were far longer than they were before. They would bend at strange angles while he crawled out of the cave. The nails on his hands and feet were thick, sharp, and long, looking more like claws or talons than nails. The boy's skin had grown pale and cold from so long in the cave, and around the boy's mouth there was brown blood from the bats caked around his lips. "Mother, I'm hungry," the boy croaked to his mother, who only embraced her son, now taller than she was. The boy hesitated for a moment before wrapping his arms around his mother also. At first, the mother was just happy to have her son back, until she realized that he was really cold. His skin clammy like the dead, and most disturbingly, he didn't have any heartbeat. Once she had her realization, her young boy whispered to her, one last time, while his hands tightened as he twisted her neck. "I'm hungry," he whispered. When he twisted off his mother's head, then drank from her blood greedily, and then dug her heart out through her neck. Now fed, the young vampire, still hungry, climbed down the mountain to where his tribe was camped. "Hungry," he said to himself while his sensitive eyes watched the entire tribe sleep. He crawled from member to member of his tribe, silent as the grave, not even losing a single pebble. First, he snapped their necks, and then tore off their heads to feed, eating their blood while it was still warm, and ripping out their hearts while it was still beating, much like what he did to the bats in the cave. But no matter how much he fed, he couldn't be satiated. He only grew hungrier. When he made it to where the child who played with the metal slept, he couldn't approach them any closer. Even in their sleep, they would hold the tarnished metal they found in the river in their hands. Though it was not known at the time what the metal was, it was silver, and the vampire could not approach the child. So the vampire moved on, killing everyone else in the tribe just as the first rays of sunlight came. His eyes and skin sensitive to the sun's light, he retreated back into the deep dark of his cave, his new home, and he was the first vampire of Dracula Mountain, and to this day he still remains in the mountains. And even now, in this day and age, if the blood of the vampire or the blood of a Dracula bat were eaten by a human, they too would become a vampire. As for the sleeping child, they would wake, and when they found their entire tribe dead, but no blood found, they carried what they could, but even though they didn't understand why they survived, and no one else did, but they did understand it had to do with the metal that they carried. So they continued to bring it with them, as they left the Dracula Mountains to explore the forest of Astoria. Though, at the time, they did not understand the importance of silver. When they found the other tribes, the exploring child gave some of their silver to them, and this ultimately would give many of the earliest nomadic tribes of Astoria what they needed: a chance. Whether that was a chance to survive or a chance to become a monster, that is a very good question.